So let's go to Revelation 10, the very end of 10. We got as far as verse 7. So we're going to look at this last part with the eating of a scroll, whatever that's about. What in the world? But we should review. How did we get here? Does anybody remember how long ago we started this? What is it? That long ago? Okay. I was just going to let you know it's been a while, but I didn't think it was that long. Okay. So that kind of gives you the pace of how we're doing this, but our goal, remember, is not to to go through the material. It's to understand the message that the vision has for us. So we're taking our time, but I think it's been fruitful for that. So let's review. Where does all this start? It starts in chapter 1. It starts with this introductory portion, just like all the letters of the New Testament. Who's writing? To whom are they writing? But this is different in that he tells us up front, this is a revelation. This is a disclosing, a revealing. And then he tells us the order. It goes from God the Father, gave it to Jesus the Son, who gave it to his angel, messenger, who gave it to John, and John's giving it to the churches. Like this long, there's this intricate communication process to get it to us. And then if you were to add on to that, everyone who's been involved since John wrote it down, all the copyists and all the people who have preserved it, what an inheritance we have here. This revelation is that important, John would say. Apparently so. Anyway, so the introduction. And then where does the vision actually pick up in chapter 1? Where does it actually start? Well, we see John on the island of Patmos, suffering for the kingdom and persevering. And he hears a voice behind him, and the voice tells him to write things down. Send it to these 7 churches. So he turns around to see who's talking, and who do we find out he sees? Do you remember? Jesus. We know that because he calls himself the one who died, and behold, he's alive forever and ever. There's only one person who can say that. So, but he's so overwhelmed by the glorious vision of this person, he falls over like dead. But he does tell us what he saw, thank God. So he's stirred to awaken. He says, Jesus tells him, you need to write down what has been, what is, and what will be, sent into those 7 churches. So then he begins to dictate 7 letters, 1 to each of those churches. That's chapters 2 and 3. And we've reviewed this enough times. What were the 3 main parts of those letters? So that's part 2, is evaluation of the churches, right? He tells them how he sees them, how he's judging their health, their faithfulness. And what Cecilia is talking about is 2 got all positive reviews, 2 got all negative reviews, and then 3 of them, a little bit of both. You're doing great here. Man, you got to fix that. And do remember that Jesus, who's evaluating his churches, because he's among them, when he sees something that is sinful or erroneous, remember he threatened them? Like harshly. He threatened to do some harsh things to discipline them and to get their attention. But to the faithful, he gave some pretty outstanding promises. What was the first thing that we see in each of those letters, though? Jesus' self-introduction. And we never want to skip that when we're looking at that section, because what Jesus says of himself is crucial. To understand the master is to understand yourself, to know where you fit and what you're meant to do. So the self-introduction part is very key. And then how did he end every single message to each of the churches? Yeah, that was a part of it. Yeah, that's in the mix of the promises to the whom? Now he would say to those who, well, he would say, it depends on how it's translated. Overcome, conquer, the victorious. But whoever holds strong in the face of this conflict, this war with the enemy, if you hold on to me, you fight with me in that spiritual sense. Because Jesus wins, you win with him. And if you are with him, he promises you these outrageous, amazing things in the new creation. So this is the pattern of each of the letters. We took our sweet time because those are so beautiful, precious. Now, once you get to chapter 4, the vision really starts, woo, there it goes, because he called up to heaven. In chapter 4, he sees the one on the throne, the 24 thrones of the 24 elders. He sees the lamps burning, 7 of them. He sees the sea of glass, clear as crystal. He sees those 4 living creatures with the eyes and the 6 wings and the faces. Remember, what are the 4 faces? Lion. I heard ox, human. What's the last one? Eagle, right? Interesting. Earthly creatures represented in heaven. Then he hears the worship of those 4 living beings. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. What do they say? Who was and is to come. And then the 24 elders respond and they fall down and they put their victory crowns down. They worship God the Creator. By His will all things exist and have their being. And then it switches. In chapter 5 it switches. And suddenly John sees a scroll in the hand, or at the right side of the one on the throne. And an angel steps up. What's his grand announcement, this great angel? What is his question? Who's worthy? And it seems to be an announcement to everyone, everywhere, all of creation, because John says no one in all of creation could step up and do it. Nobody. So John's weeping. He's so disappointed. And one of the elders comes up eventually. We don't know how long. And he says, you don't have to weep. We found somebody. The Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has done what? He's conquered, overcome. He's victorious. He's able to do it. He's worthy to do it. And so when John looks to find the lion, he sees a lamb who's been slain, but here he is standing at the throne of God. He's got 7 horns, 7 eyes. He's worthy. And as soon as he goes to take that scroll, the worship bursts out again. The 4 living creatures and the 24 elders, they all worship him as worthy. He purchased and redeemed people for God to be a kingdom and priest. And then all the angels, all of them, and it's beyond numbering, 10,000 times 10,000, bigger than I can count, John would say. And all these angels fill the scene, and they're worshiping the Lamb too. And then chapter 5 ends with all of creation worshiping the one on the throne and the Lamb together. Now, as I presented to you, I think that closes our first cycle, the first big story. The whole thing's told very generally, all done right there. And then we kind of, chapter 6, we back up and we tell John tells us about the 7 seals that start to get opened. He tells us about 6 of them in chapter 6. And we won't review all those today. But are they positive or negative effects on the world? Negative. Yeah. The 4 horsemen, which kind of show how God has judged humans all throughout human history. The 5th seal was about the souls under the altar of incense in heaven. What was their great question, their great cry? How long until you judge the inhabitants of the earth and avenge our blood? How long is it going to take for you to finally establish the justice you promised, right? And then he gives them comfort, gives them white clothes to wear, and says, when was it he pinpointed? Not really. But when did he say he would get it to it? What is it? Until all of the fellow sufferers suffer. So it's going to be a little while, and that's going to be when I know it's time, when everyone who's meant to suffer for Christ suffers. Maybe not that reassuring to us, but to them I'm sure it means the world. Now the 6th seal is when all of creation goes nuts. Remember? On earth, in the heavens, everything's going haywire, and the human beings on earth, it doesn't matter what your rank or position, all the human beings on earth, they're fearfully hiding, and they don't want to deal with the one on the throne or the wrath of the Lamb. Now you get to chapter 7, and we get this little interlude. Like we're waiting for the 7th seal. We got 6 of them done, all right. What's the big last one? And you got to wait, because he tells us about the 144,000 were sealed to protect them from the harm of the winds coming. And then you see the multitude beyond counting before the throne who have come out of the tribulation. And at the end of chapter 7 is one of the most, to me, the most beautiful parts of Revelation, where the promises of God to those overcomers is spoken through the prophetic language of the Old Testament. So, it gives you goosebumps. Chapter 8, what do we see? We see the final seal opened. Yes, the 7th seal of the scroll in the hand of the Lamb is opened. What exciting thing happens? Heaven goes quiet. What? So we kind of talked about what might that mean. I personally believe it means that the work of God is accomplished, and the city or capital of God's decision-making place, his throne room, heaven itself, can be still. It's done. And I think the new creation is coming. So I think that's the end of the second telling of the story. So then you move on into chapter 8, and there are 7, not seals this time, 7 what? Trumpets handed out to 7 angels. But before, and please remember this part, this is crucial. Before the 7 trumpets are handed out, we see an angel at the altar of incense in heaven. He takes incense and he's given fire from the altar, put it in a censer. And what does the incense represent? Please do not forget that element, because we're going right back to the 5th seal with the souls under the altar. The cry of God's people for justice and for the judgment of the wicked on the earth, just for God to do what he promised all along. It's put in the censer. The angel hurls it to earth, and as soon as he does that, the 7 trumpets start to blow, and terrible judgments are unleashed. The 4 trumpets are a third of all of creation being destroyed in some way. It's all very weird and exciting, terrible, because it's creative the way God describes this. The only thing to be entirely destroyed was what? Do you remember? Grass. Everything else is a third, a third, a third. Grass, all of it. You get to the 5th seal, and the abyss is opened by a fallen star, and out of the abyss comes the smoke. And what comes out of the smoke? The freakish mutant locusts, right? Again, as I was walking through it with you, I believe that based on the Old Testament language, these are true human armies and nations, but it's depicted in the most horrific way one might imagine based on the Old Testament. And then the 6th trumpet is blown, and another horrific mutant army comes, this time from the 4 angels at the Euphrates River. But once he says that they're the 4 angels at the river unleashed to do their business, he says, and the number of the mounted troops was, do you remember? 200 million. Wait a minute. We were just talking about 4 angels. So what are you getting 200 million horsemen? And again, we talked about that, I believe, being a depiction of the human nations coming against God's people. Anyway, so that's the 6th seal. Now, remember, the locust mutant creatures, they were doing what for 5 months? Yeah. Torturing. You're not allowed to kill them. Torture them. It's awful, but okay. They're limited. But when the 200 million horse army comes through, what are they doing? They're killing. And how many of the people of earth are being killed by them, according to the vision? We're back to the 3rd, just like the first 4 trumpets. Okay. Now, when we get to chapter 9, those are where we saw the 5th and 6th trumpets being blown. We end chapter 9 with people not repenting. The wicked are not repenting. Chapter 10 is where we saw, and this is where we did last time, we see that this mighty angel, the only other mighty angel described thusly is the one that announces who's worthy. Now we get a second mighty angel coming out of heaven. He plants a foot on the sea, on the land. He raises a right hand. He swears by him who lives forever and ever and created everything, that just before the 7th trumpet is announced, the mystery of God will be accomplished that he spoke through his servants, the prophets. There we are. We're caught up. Okay. So let's read chapter 10. It's pretty short, just to review and catch what we're going to look at the beginning of our study. Anyone willing to do that for us? And I'm going to start the live stream, so do interact, but just so you know. Now that I did that, anyone want to read chapter 10? Hello, Facebook Live. Okay, Kathy, go for it.
The angel on the scroll. Then I saw another mighty angel coming down from heaven. He was robed in a cloud with a rainbow above his head. His face was like the sun, and his legs were like fiery pillars. He was holding a little scroll, which lay open in his hand. He planted his right foot on the sea and his left foot on the land, and he gave a loud shout like the roar of a lion. When he shouted, the voices of the 7 thunders spoke. And when the 7 thunders spoke, I was about to write, but I heard a voice from heaven say, "Seal up what the 7 thunders have said, and do not write it down." Then the angel I had seen standing on the sea and on the land raised his right hand to heaven, and he swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created the heavens and all that is in them, the earth and all that is in it, and the sea and all that is in it, and said, "There will be no more delay." But in the days when the 7th angel is about to sound his trumpet, the mystery of God will be accomplished, just as he announced to his servants, the prophets. Then the voice that I had heard from heaven spoke to me once more, "Go take the scroll that lies open in the hand of the angel who is standing on the sea and on the land." So I went to the angel and asked him to give me the little scroll. And he said to me, "Take it and eat it. It will turn your stomach sour, but in your mouth it will be a sweet took the little scroll from the angel's hand and ate it. It tasted as sweet as honey in my mouth, but when I had eaten it, my stomach turned sour. Then I was told, you must prophesy again about many peoples, nations, languages, and kings.
Okay, so this is weird. Mighty angel, we don't know, he doesn't really describe his size, but a lot of people, when they read this, imagine this angel to be massive. Maybe, who knows? I do know it's intimidating. Based on John's description, what she just read, isn't this like not your average Joe? I mean, and so as he stands before this mighty, intimidating angel who just swore with this mighty voice that's compared to a lion's roar, swore by God what's about to happen, notice what a voice from heaven tells John to do. Go take the scroll that lies open in the hand of that angel who is standing on the sea and on the land. Okay. Sir? I mean, like, wow, okay, so go take it. Now, he hasn't been told what to do with it. So far, his whole instruction is just to go take it. So, I went to the angel and asked him to give me the little scroll. That's smart. Don't demand this, okay? He asks him, and as soon as the angel is doing this thing, giving him this little scroll that's open in his hand, he gives him a very strange instruction. Eat it. Now, if we didn't have, our Old Testament prophecy to work with here, this would seem totally random and bizarre. It still is, kind of. But this actually is found in the Old Testament already. So we actually have this, like we've seen all the way through Revelation, we have this echo of something from what God's already done with his people Israel in the Old Testament prophets. So let's go back. Let me find out where it is. Ezekiel chapter 2. We've turned to Ezekiel a lot in our study of Revelation because there are a lot of parallels. Ezekiel chapter 2. And remember in chapter 1, he sees this fantastic, scary vision of this terrible storm with these living creatures in it that we find out are cherubim later. And there's fire and there's these wheels with eyeballs all over that are, connected to these four, like the horrifying vision, really, if we were to see it. Then he sees the one on the throne. He sees God himself above all this. And you get the idea that God's riding on his mobile chariot. And these four living beings are his companions that move his throne. And so now in chapter 2, he's called by Yahweh to be his messenger to the people. So we're going to skip down to verse 9, though. After he receives his calling to be a prophet to Israel, he says, Then I looked and I saw a hand stretched out to me. Don't know whose hand it is. In it was a scroll which he unrolled before me. So just like this angel in Revelation 10, it's unrolled, right? It's not rolled up and sealed like the one in Revelation 5. On both sides of it were written words of lament and mourning and woe. Now, if it's a scroll being handed to Ezekiel from a heavenly being, either the one on the throne or one of his creatures, it's a pretty good chance this is a decree of the king. Is that agreed? Yes. The decree has been reached. Here it is. You need to announce it. Now, what's an interesting parallel here between this and the one in Revelation 5? What's one detail they have in common? There's writing on both sides. Now here, Ezekiel tells us the summary of what's on it. In Revelation 5, John didn't know because it was still rolled up. But it's interesting, little detail there. Obviously, whatever's on this scroll is terrible. Because he says there were written words of lament, mourning, and woe. You don't have lament, warning, and woe if there's blessings and promises on this paper. Right? So whatever God's decree, it's going to lead to terrible heartache, misery. Then look at chapter 3, verse 1. He said to me, so now we're assuming it's the one on the throne. Now who else would the he be? It's the one on the throne that's been talking to. He said to me, Son of man, eat what is before you. Eat this scroll. okay. Then go and speak to the people of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he gave me the scroll to eat. Listen to how he describes how this went down. Then he said to me, Son of man, eat the scroll I'm giving you and fill your stomach with it. So I ate it, and it tasted as sweet as honey in my mouth. This was a symbolic representation of Ezekiel taking God's word into himself so that he could present it to the people. Do you see that? It's a symbolic representation of his calling to be a prophet. What is the detail that he shares here that John shares in Revelation 10? Once both prophets eat the scroll, what's the one thing they have in common? Tastes like honey. But see, Ezekiel did not mention what happens after that. John does. What does John say happened once it reaches his stomach? What do you make of that? By the way, it's totally ironic what Ezekiel says anyways, because he says that what's on the scroll are words of lament, mourning, and woe, yet when he eats it, it tastes sweet. What's that? How can that be true? The poison tasted lovely. I mean, it's almost the same picture. Yeah.
Is that God's word coming to you when it tastes sweet? That's what one says.
Okay. Generally, I think that's how people understand this. That to the one who loves the word, when you receive it, whatever it is, when you receive it, it is sweet to you. I think there's something to that. That makes sense to me. I'd go along with that. So what does it mean that John says, back in Revelation 10, that when it reached his stomach, it turned sour? What do you make of that?
When he prophesied and no one listened.
What's that?
When he prophesied and no one listened to the word of God and turned away from it.
Are you speaking of John or Ezekiel?
John.
Okay. Now, he doesn't know what's going to happen yet. I mean, John himself, all he's doing is getting the vision. He hasn't spoken to anybody about it yet, so he doesn't really know how it's going to be received. But maybe you're saying that shows that it's not going to be received. Is that what you mean? Like the turning sours? Okay.
Whatever, it tasted sweet, but after he ate it, there has to be something that happens afterwards.
Yeah.
It made him so sick.
And it's negative, whatever it is, right? Sour is not good when it's in your stomach. Were you going to say something, Nancy?
Yeah, I thought it was something bad.
Yeah. So it starts off sweet, pleasant, enjoyable, ends up negative. So I was looking at this and I thought, first of all, if it's a word of terrible judgment, I'm not sure why it would taste sweet in your mouth. Even if you love God's word, I would still lament over what he's decreed. Unless this connects us back to those souls under the altar. Which is to say, as terrible as God's decision is, at least it's accomplishing what he promised he would do so long ago. At least evil's going to be dealt with, finally. At least the injustice of his innocent ones suffering for all of these millennia is finally going to be addressed and answered, rather than just hovering overhead over this cloud of injustice over the world. God's finally going to clear it away, and as king over the world, he's going to decree what should have been decreed all along, right? Maybe that has something to do with it. I did find this one passage in Job 20 that actually has both of these elements, sweet in the mouth, sour in the stomach. And I found it interesting because in all the commentaries and other things I looked at, they always focused on the sweet in the mouth back in Ezekiel. And they kind of left the sour in the stomach, just John saying that. But then I was doing my little word study and I found this reference and I'm like, John seemed to have Job in mind too. What are you going to say?
I'm going to say, everything is all about sin, sinful world. Sin, as we know it, is like sweet in the mouth. It seems great, but when it's digested, when everything's all done on the smoke altar, it's sour.
That's a very good thought. What if the result of the scroll speaks to the effect of the reason God's wrath is coming? That's a very good thought. So this is Job 20. And let's see what is said here, because I think what Brother Bill just said takes us directly to what the passage in Job says. So let's go back to Job 20 here. Okay. Yeah, I think I put the range of verses just so we get some context what he's talking about. 20. Yeah, so let's actually back up a little bit just so we know who he's talking about. Yeah, if you start in verse 6, you understand who the he is, who's being discussed here. So Job 20, starting in verse 6. So just so you know, this is Zophar speaking, one of the friends of Job. As I've mentioned before, just because something's in Job does not mean it's reliably true. Because Job and his friends got some things wrong. Agreed? That's why God rebukes him harshly at the end of the book. So we do have to take what they're saying and say, does this fit? Does this sound right? Because they got a lot right and they got a lot wrong. So we'll just keep that in mind as we read here. Though the pride of the godless person reaches to the heavens, and his head touches the clouds, he will perish forever like his own dung. Oh my goodness! How do you feel so far? Those who have seen him will say, where is he? So we're already getting that idea that the pleasures or the benefits of sin are very temporary, and you end with nothing. Like a dream he flies away, no more to be found, banished like a vision of the night. The eye that saw him will not see him again. His place will look on him no more. His children must make amends to the poor. His own hands must give back his wealth. In fact, so in everything he earned and worked so hard for, it's gone, right? He doesn't get to keep it. It's a very common theme in the Old Testament. The youthful vigor that fills his bones will lie with him in the dust. So everything he took pride in is now useless to him. Isn't this a very true thing from the Old Covenant Scriptures? Everything that you would place your hope in this world is so temporary, it's a foolish thing to put your hope in and pride in that. So now we're to the text. Though evil is sweet in his mouth and he hides it under his tongue, though he cannot bear to let it go and lets it linger in his mouth, yet his food will turn sour in his stomach. It will become the venom of serpents within him. He will spit out the riches he swallowed. God will make his stomach vomit them out. So, without even having turned there, Bill nailed the very true point about the sweet turning sour. It is a message about wickedness, the prideful. And I think it's fair to say that if what John is receiving from this angel is akin to Ezekiel's filled of lament, mourning, and woe, it's about God dealing with sinfulness, wickedness. So, I think that's a good conclusion to reach. All right, so back in Revelation 10. Let's go on back there. I don't know if anyone here needs to hear that tonight, but it's very possible. Because even as disciples of Jesus, we go through these times when the allure of the world is very powerful. Amen? The efforts we make to work hard and to store up inheritance for our children, or whatever it is, to go on our vacation. Like, we take pride in how we look because we're taking care of our bodies or how we're feeling and health. All the things that we're tempted to put our security and our rest in. God will just remind us that's a bad idea because that's all subject to change. The one thing, according to the book of Revelation, that is not subject to change is the living one on the throne who was and is to come. He's the one who lives forever and ever and who created all things, like the angel said. And so those who belong to him have that eternal hope. Those who trust in him. Just because you exist doesn't mean you have that. It's because you belong to the living one, right? So this is just an encouragement. Make sure your focus and trust is in the proper place. Okay, so let's continue on with what John says. Look at verse 10. I took the little scroll from the angel's hand and ate it. It tasted as sweet as honey in my mouth. When I had eaten it, my stomach turned sour. Then I was told, you must prophesy again about many peoples, nations, languages, and kings. So in a very real way, just like with Ezekiel, this is a symbolic gesture from God saying, your call to prophecy continues. The vision's not over. the need for the world to hear my warnings isn't over. Here you go again, John. Like, strap in. You got more to do here. And so the vision does continue. And what we're going to see in the next chapter, chapter 11, we're going to jump into that now, it applies to the nations and the kings and the peoples of the earth. In fact, I did a little survey, especially on the word kings, because I thought that was interesting. Just want to give you a list of the times that John refers to the kings in his vision. So in Revelation 1:5, guess who's described as the ruler of the kings of the earth? No. I mean, he does at a certain level for now, but the true ruler, Jesus. He's the one that there's blessing from him that John offers. And he calls him the ruler of the kings of the earth. Now, that's a great way to set up this vision, because a big part of this vision is that all the powers of earth under Satan's masterminding, all the powers of earth are going to be subject to Jesus. In reality, the way God has declared they already are. Because what did Jesus say before he gave his disciples the Great Commission? All authority in heaven. He didn't limit it to heaven. On earth too. That means all earthly authorities and powers are under mine. They rank under me, right? So, what we see in Revelation is that reality becoming concretely understood by all at the end of the story. So, kings of the earth in chapter 6, verse 15, they're among all those people hiding from God's wrath, right? In chapter 9, verse 11, if I'm reading this correctly, when we talked about the locust army, if I'm correct, and that's figurative of a human army, it says they have as king over them the angel of the abyss. Chapter 16, there's a way prepared for the kings of the east to come. Also in chapter 16, these frogs that are demonic spirits go out to deceive the kings of the whole earth. Chapter 17, kings of the earth committed adultery with the great prostitute. Also chapter 17, the 7 heads of the beast are 7 hills and 7 kings. Again, all of the rest are in chapter 17. 7 horns are 7 kings. The Lamb is the King of kings. The woman is the city that rules over the kings of the earth. Would you say that John still had to prophesy about kings? Oh yeah. And the peoples and the nations. So, all that to just point out, when he was told you still have to do a lot of prophesying about the kingdoms of people, yeah, it's true. The whole vision bears that out. Okay. So let's just let chapter 10 settle in, because chapter 11 is quite a ride. So just let that. Okay, big angel, eat the scroll. You got to prophesy some more. Okay, is that settled in? Let's go. Chapter 11. Oh my goodness. Now, if you've looked at all at the controversies of Revelation, we've hit dozens of them already, I know. But this is one of the most intriguing to people, I think. And I've just been reviewing some of the thoughts people have in print and on videos online and stuff. And oh my goodness, the range of opinions about this 2-witness business is all over the map. So, I'm going to solve it all. No, I'm not. What we're going to do, we're going to, what I want to do is once again, slow it down, and rather than just throw a bunch of Bible verses at you and say, trust me, it all fits, I promise. What I want to do is walk through the Old Covenant picture that has been guiding us this whole time. What are the patterns that the Old Testament prophets have given us to make sense of this prophecy of the New Covenant? That's kind of our approach, as it's always been, and I think it'll help you. It certainly has helped me have some insight about this. So, all right, let's start at the beginning of chapter 11. Will somebody read verses 11, Chapter 11, verses 1 through 6. Let's start there.
I will.
Okay.
I was given a reed like a measuring rod and was told, go and measure the temple of God and the altar with its worshippers, but exclude the outer court. Do not measure it, because it has been given to the Gentiles. They will trample on the holy city for 42 months, and I will appoint my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. They are the stand before the Lord of the earth. If anyone tries to harm them, fire comes from their mouths and devours their enemies. This is how anyone who wants to harm them must die. They have power to shut up the heavens so that it will not rain during the time they are prophesying. And they have power to turn the waters into blood and to strike the earth with every kind of plague as often as they want.
Yowza! Just want to remind you of something before we press into this. The patterns of the revelation are very important. Do you remember that in the sixth... Nah, I shouldn't put it that. In the seven seals part, there was a certain pattern to how it was laid out in the revelation. I just wanted to show you there is a bit of a parallel here in the seven trumpets section. So do you remember the six seals are opened, we get all of them, boom, 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 all in a row. And then there's the, I've been calling it an interlude, but then there's the picture of the righteous ones. And if you remember, that was two groups of righteous ones. There was the 144,000, and then there was the multitude in heaven, the ones who came out of the tribulation. So we had this interlude of the righteous ones, and then we go back to the seventh seal. And that's the silence in heaven. Okay. Well, here we have the six trumpets. And then we have what we're in the middle of now, which is like this interlude. We don't get the seventh trumpet right away. What happened to the seventh trumpet? So, again, righteous ones are depicted because we have John's call to prophesy. And then we have this picture of the two witnesses. The righteous ones are being depicted. I just think it's interesting that the revelation is presented to us this way. Why would this pattern be happening? So I just want to suggest something. I can't tell you for sure this is why God did it this way. The seals and the trumpets represent God's ultimate purpose to establish justice because his kingdom is established on justice. That is a promise from the Old Testament, way back. God is king, will have righteousness and justice as the foundation of his kingdom. Now to us, that sounds nice. To ancient peoples living under corrupted kings, that is the most beautiful thing anyone could promise. We kind of have a suspicion of monarchy anyway, because we're good red-blooded Americans, down with the monarchy, up with the, republic. Just so you know, that wasn't even a thought in the ancient mind. Kingship was an assumed reality. Everybody agree with that? Like, the divine right of kings, that didn't start with Britain. That's been the way of things in most of human societies for most of human life. So the idea that if you have a wicked, corrupt king, everyone will be miserable, except his cronies. That's just how people lived for because most kings have been corrupt, let's face it. Some have been good, most corrupt. So to know that the King of heaven and earth promised, every time it came up, he made the point that he promised, my kingdom is established on justice and righteousness. Not favorites, not who can bribe me, not who do I like and who don't. It's just based on what's right. For people living under those systems, and let's face it, we have leaders today that are corrupt and make people miserable. It doesn't matter what the governmental system. Anyone in charge that's corrupt, people suffer. I think everyone can get on board with the fact that if you lived in a system where everyone in charge of you, from the king down, if they did what was right and good and just, and it was never corrupted by anything, we would all thrive. We would all have such joy and happiness. That's always been God's promise. So, anyways, for God to deal with sin, because that's a part of his essential promise to his universe, this focuses on the wicked man. And so he always takes this break so far in these two systems to remind us that the righteous ones are still there. They're still in the mix. But they have a role to play. And so here, John's going to be prophesying, and guess what these two are doing? They're prophesying. It says so in the text. They prophesy for a certain number of days. What does it say? How many days? Yeah. Now over here, the play in the midst of a dark, corrupted world. You are the voice of God to that dark, corrupted world. You declare his righteousness, his judgment, the hope of his promises. And I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind. In the midst of all God's doing to judge a wicked world, he has a voice. He's not randomly just terrorizing people and they have no idea why. When God brings judgment, guess what else he's doing? He's telling people why. Here's the point. He's not sadistic, amen?
Amen.
I mean, if he was, we'd know it. If God's going to mete out his punishments as a righteous king, he's going to send his servants to make sure people understand it. And aren't wondering what's going on. They're going to know why God's doing what he's doing. In fact, there's I wish I could remember the prophet. I'll have to find this for you. But one of the prophets, he's one of the minor prophets we call him, he said that God does not do anything without disclosing it first to his servants, the prophets. I don't think that means every little thing ever. But when he's about to bring something major into the world of human affairs, he doesn't keep you ignorant about what he's up to. He's going to tell you. Why do you think that's his strategy? Why does Jonah, for instance, go to Nineveh to let them know you're all going down? He doesn't even offer them any ifs. He's not like, but if, you'll be fine. He doesn't even give them any hope. He just lets them know, it's decided, heaven's decreed it, you're going down. You got some days, get your affairs in order. Why do you think God did that? Instead of just blowing them up because he can.
So they can change.
Yeah. God's always had, number one, he's always giving people this awareness of what's happening so they can respond accordingly. Which miraculously, Nineveh did it. They were terrible and still they did it. It's an amazing story. I think that's a bigger deal than the fish, to be honest. These Ninevites repented? Wow! And somehow Jonah suspected it might happen, which is even more crazy to me. He's like, that's why I didn't want to come. I knew you'd be nice to these monsters. Anyway. I shouldn't make fun of him. I think I'd be in the same boat. They were terrible. I mean, the way they treated his fellow Israelites was just... Oh. Anyway, so I think it's partly that. I think it's also partly because of what we're talking about. God very much values justice. He wants it to be understood he's being just. That he doesn't want there to be any right-minded person who could honestly look at him and say, well, you're just mean. He wants it to be understood. No, I'm doing, like any good parent should explain to their children why they're being punished. Agreed? Otherwise, you're just hurting them. They don't understand why. They just know it's, Mommy and Daddy are hurting me again. Or they're taking something I love. You need to explain to them if there's going to be any benefit to it. Here's what's happening. And I want you to know I'm not in the wrong here. This is a part of my job, right? And I think that's a big part of why God discloses these things through his prophetic righteous ones. Anywho, so let's look at these particular righteous ones in this interlude of the trumpets. He doesn't actually begin with the righteous ones, does he? He talks about this reed to measure. He's given a reed, and this is interesting because he's been interacting with the vision more in this part than he has the rest of the vision. I mean, he has this little, don't weep, we found the Lion of the tribe of Judah's triumph. We have that interaction with the vision, but most of the vision has just been John observing, right? Here, he's told to go talk to the angel and get the scroll, to eat it. That's different. And now he's given something else, a reed, and he said to go do something with it, go measure. He's now a part of the vision. He's not just an observer. This is very much like some of the prophets of the Old Testament. They're not just looking at visions, they're actually invited to be a part of it and act things out. I wanted to point you to a few places where this idea of the measuring stick and the measuring is found in the prophetic visions of the Old Testament. And then we're going to look at one thing that's pretty unique about John's experience. So let's start in... Probably the most significant one, I would say, is Ezekiel 40. So let's go to Ezekiel 40. While I erase the board, you turn there. We're not going to read much of this just because I don't think it's very beneficial to do that. But I wanted you to be able to see it with your own eyes. That this is a very well-established pattern of the prophets and their visions. And I'm hoping we're going to see a pattern here that explains what's with the measuring. Just to remind you, back in Revelation 11, he is told to measure the temple of God, the altar with its worshippers, but not the outer court, because that's given over to the Gentiles. So here we are in Ezekiel 40. Well, there you are. I have to get there with you. Now, as a background, remember that Ezekiel is prophesying during the time that God's about to, or just has, punished Israel, or Judah. Gosh, there we go. Judah, the southern nation, is being punished. First, they were taken out of their land, and Ezekiel's among them. He's in a foreign land now. But he's prophesying because God has supernaturally taken him over to Jerusalem to prophesy to the people there about what the next stage of judgment is. Being taken out of the land was not the end of the judgment. Because they were rebellious still, what was the final step of their judgment back then? Do you remember? Not just getting taken out of the land. The destruction of the city and the temple. They still have their city and temple, whoever was left. But now God said, you still, after I took you out of the land, you're still going to rebel against me? All right, I got to go the final step. And so the Babylonians level the place. Anyway, what Ezekiel's prophesying, what he's foreseeing in the Spirit, is another temple. He's getting the whole plans for another temple, and he's watching it unfold. So in chapter 40, look what he starts with here. In the 25th year of our exile, at the beginning of the year, on the 10th of the month, in the 14th year after the fall of the city, so it's been 14 years since they lost their temple. On that very day, the hand of Yahweh was on me, and he took me there. In visions of God, he took me to the land of Israel and set me on a very high mountain, on whose south side were some buildings that looked like a city. He took me there, and I saw a man whose appearance was like bronze. What does that tell us? It's a celestial being. It's not a human, right? We've seen that many times in the prophets. He was standing in the gateway with a linen cord and a measuring rod in his hand. The man said to me, Son of man, look carefully and listen closely. Pay attention to everything I'm going to show you, for that is why you have been brought here. Tell the people of Israel everything you see. Then he follows this person around while they measure everything. It goes on chapter after chapter after chapter. And if you're reading this for your daily devotions, you're like, okay. And he's telling you in cubits, you're like, all right. The point of this, and it's intricate, and you're almost wondering, why is there so much information in here about this celestial, vision of this other temple to be built? One thing that I wanted to point out here is that the reason for the measurements is to show, it seems to be, to show that God intends this very seriously to happen. This is not just this hypothetical thing. Why go through all the measuring, right? So what do you notice here, though? Is Ezekiel the one with the measuring rod, and is Ezekiel the one doing the measuring?
No.
Huh. He's following along, being a recorder of the information, because that's why you were brought here, it says, right? This isn't the only time that a prophet saw someone measuring. If you go to Zechariah chapter 2, which is towards the end of the New Testament, one of the second to last prophet of the Old Testament. Zechariah 2. You're going to see something very familiar. All right. So Zechariah 2, start with me in verse 1. Give you a second here. It's right before Malachi, which is right before Matthew. If you go to the New Testament and skip back 2 books, you're there. Zechariah 2. By the way, I don't know if we're going to get to that tonight, but if you want to keep something in Zechariah 2, we're going to be in chapter 4 not too long. We're going to talk about the 2 witnesses. But anyway, so let's read from chapter 2, verse 1. Then I looked up, and there before me was a man with a measuring line in his hand. I asked, Where are you going? He answered me, To measure Jerusalem to find out how wide and how long it is. While the angel who was speaking to me was leaving, Another angel came to meet him and said to him, "Run, tell that young man, Jerusalem will be a city without walls, because of the great number of people and animals in it. And I myself will be a wall of fire around it, declares Yahweh, and I will be its glory within." Oh my gosh, that's so amazing to imagine. We don't need physical walls because God promised to be a supernatural wall of fire around us. By the way, which might be more of a deterrent against your enemies who want to invade you? Brick, stone, or divine fire, right? Oh my gosh. Doesn't this remind you when Elisha had his servant with him and they're being besieged in the town they're in, and Elisha's playing it cool, doesn't seem too concerned. His servant's kind of freaking out because this is hopeless. And he says to Elisha, What's up? What do you know that I don't know? And Elisha prays, says, "Lord, show him." And what happened? What did he see?
Chariots of fire.
This blazing army surrounding the city as this defense. And apparently the enemies could see it, but this servant couldn't see it. And that totally reminds me of that. He's going to surround the city with fire. Maybe a fiery army, like that. Anyway, but if you look at what he says next. "Come, come, flee from the land of the north, declares Yahweh, for I have scattered you to the four winds of heaven, declares Yahweh. Come, Zion, escape, you who live in daughter Babylon." Ooh, keep that in mind. "For this is what Yahweh of hosts says, after the glorious one has sent me against the nations that have plundered you, for whoever touches you touches the apple of his eye." Whoa, isn't that beautiful? "I will surely raise my hand against them so that their slaves will plunder them. Then you will know that Yahweh of hosts has sent me." So let me ask you, in this reference to the measuring of the city, is this a hopeful or a judgmental picture? Is God promising good or is he threatening? What is it?
Good.
Positive, right? Back in Ezekiel, what was it? When he saw the person measuring everything. Was it a promise of good or was it a promise of judgment? Which we didn't really talk about, but what would you guess? It's a brand new city that's going to come. So it seems to be a promise. You know, you've lost your old temple, but here's this beautiful vision of another one coming. So here's one thing I found. We're not going to go over all of these just for time's sake. But one thing I found is I did a survey of measuring in the Old Testament. Let me run it down for you here. Okay. If you want a copy of these references, I can make that for you, but I just want to go through these. In Isaiah 28:17, "I will make justice the measuring line and righteousness the plumb line." In Isaiah 34:11, "God will stretch out over Edom the measuring line of chaos and the plumb line of desolation." Do you see, just in those two references, the measurement of God could either be for judgment or for hope. Is that right? Isaiah 64:12, along with 64:9, Lamentations 5:22, "Will you punish us beyond measure?" In other words, will you punish us beyond the measure you've taken that we deserve it? Will you go beyond what we deserve? In Jeremiah 10:24, also in 30:11 and 46:28, there's a reference to being disciplined only according to the due measure. In other words, I will only punish you according to what your deeds deserve to be punished. I won't underpunish you. I won't overpunish you. I'm going to measure you, and I'll deal with you according to that exact measurement. In these references to being punished beyond measure or disciplined to due measure, is this positive or negative? Is the measure, what is it?
Positive.
Well, in the sense that you're being punished or disciplined, the measurement is for negative. It's your sins are finding you out, but don't worry, I'll be fair, right? So the positive is fairness, but it's still punishment because you sinned. In Lamentations 2:8, this is a really interesting figurative language. It says, Yahweh laid out a measuring line for destruction. We keep hearing this language of measurement as if to take stock of what God needs to do as a king to establish justice. And why measuring? Isn't the whole point of measurement precision? In fact, just before I came over, we're doing some things to get ready for my in-laws to come. So Christina's wanting to put some pictures in some new places. And she said, can you help me with that? That's a two-person job. Sure. So we're working on that. And of course, when you're doing this, you want it to work out precisely, and usually it won't for us at least. And so you live with it. You just go. But we got out the level. We got our little tape measure. We're trying to make this just so. Now, if I were just going to spitball, which I'm inclined to do, to be honest with you, if I were to just spitball it, it would basically look right, but I'd probably be unhappy with it in 3 days because I'm like, oh, I got to look at that every day. The whole point of getting out your measuring tools is for precision. Why is God emphasizing precision when he talks about judgment or promises? Again, I can't emphasize this enough. It's because of his ultimate promise of kingship. I will do it rightly. You can count on me as king over all things, which, by the way, isn't that the whole message of Jesus? The kingdom of God has come. This is the central theme of our entire scriptures. If God's kingdom is at the heart of everything that he's been up to, and if he sits on that throne at the center of everything, the whole hope of mankind rests on him keeping this promise. I will do it righteously. So are we grateful that he's getting out a measuring line to decide what to do? Praise God, he's getting out a measuring line. He's not just like, I'll blow up your city. We'll see if that works.
What's wrong city?
Yeah, right. Oops. You know,
Measure.
the,
I want
preci-
that city.
the precision of God to make his decrees is our only hope. It's our only hope that we can have a thriving, full life with God's world and in his new creation. So praise God for the measuring picture and the measuring reality. What else here? There's a lot of this I don't think we need to look at now. Just because you find it doesn't mean to talk about it. Oh, I think it's interesting. In Revelation 21, we see another person, not John this time, an angel in Revelation 21:15. When John finally sees the new creation and the new Jerusalem coming down, again, there's an angel, and John's following him around while he takes measurements of the new city. Just like Ezekiel. Again, God wants us to know, I'm taking this seriously. This is real. I'm not just painting pretty poetic pictures for you. This is going to happen. So, if I could summarize this whole idea of why would John be told to measure? I think it's indicative of the fact that God's measurement means two things. One of two things or both things. And that's actually the whole story of Revelation. Number one, God will be precise when he metes out his punishments on the wicked as the souls under the altar judge the inhabitants of the earth and avenge our blood. He'll be precise and he'll be right. Secondly, he'll be precise and right when he gives his rewards and his benefits to his faithful ones. The measurement means both. Now, as we move forward, we're going to see that enacted in the two witnesses. And I'm not even sure if we have time for that tonight. Let's see. Okay, we got some time. So, like I said, keep something here in this Zechariah 2 passage if you're still there, because Zechariah 4 is coming up. But let's go back to Revelation 11 to see where John goes from this measurement language. Some questions pop up here. Okay. John hears the command to measure the temple of God. And what other two things is he told to measure?
Courtyard.
The altar
Okay.
and the worshippers.
And the worshipers. That's interesting. Well, worshipers, 3 cubits. And, I mean, what's going on here?
Mine
What
says
is-
count the number of worshipers.
Okay, that makes sense. Measuring, right? I think that's a good way to do it. What is he not to measure?
The outer courtyard.
Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. Here's one reason why this is. We need to think about what this means. At least as we talked about way at the beginning. A lot, maybe most, but a lot of scholars agree that Revelation was written in the 90s AD. So this is after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. Because that happened in 70 AD, right? The Romans came in and destroyed the temple. If the Revelation was written in the mid-90s, that's like 20-ish, 25-ish years after the destruction of the temple. If that's true, what? Go measure the temple of God. There's not one anymore. It's gone. So people who study Revelation have to wrestle with that. Because John writes about the temple as if it's obvious what he's talking about. Oh, the temple of God. Sure, I'll go do that. So, a couple of things come to mind. Number one, could our dating be wrong? Was maybe Revelation written before the temple was destroyed? A lot of people believe that. A lot of people believe Revelation is written specifically about the destruction of Jerusalem. Not the end of the world, but the end of Jerusalem. I don't quite agree with that, but they make some interesting points. The other thought is, well, there's two more I want to share with you. Two more thoughts. One is that this speaks of the future temple that will be built. I know if you're into, if you find great interest and look into biblical prophecy, a very popular notion, might even be a majority notion in America, is that there is required for the prophecies of our Bible to be fulfilled, there's required that a third temple be built. Now, just to review, because I don't know where everyone is in their understanding of the storyline here. We talk about a third temple, that means there must have been a first and a second. So if you remember, the people of God began with a tabernacle in the wilderness, correct? God told Moses all the instructions to build it at Mount Sinai. This is God ordained, God designed. They built it according to specifications. God dwelt with them in the tent because they're in tents. He's with them, Emmanuel, praise God. Now, when they get into the promised land, after many generations of their actually being in the land, King David has it in his heart to build God a temple. Because he feels bad that he's living in this beautiful palace and God's living in a tent. Like, that's not cool. So he really wants to build God a permanent temple to honor him as like his palace on earth. His throne room has a palace. Why did David not do it then? God told him no, through the prophet. You can't do it. Your son's going to do it because you are a man of blood. You have blood on your hands. Which probably means he was a warrior, which he was. He conquered with bloodshed. Solomon ruled over a nation, and he kind of extended the influence of Israel through marriage, which didn't turn out so well either. But anyway, so Solomon gets to build the first temple. We call it Solomon's Temple because he oversaw the project. Beautiful. We don't know a lot about this temple, just the details given in the Bible, but oh my goodness, the gold and the craftsmanship and the size of just this marvelous thing that was done in the ancient world. The amount of quality logs that were hauled in from a fellow king that he was chums with, just mind-blowing. This project took so long to do. Now, this temple was destroyed by Babylon. That's what we just talked about with Ezekiel. So when they come back 70 years later into their land and are given permission to rebuild the city and the temple, we have what's called the Second Temple. And if you read Ezra and Nehemiah, you get this story. What was the negative about the Second Temple? Yeah, man. There were people who were old enough to be alive to see this first one Solomon built. I mean, Solomon was long gone, but the temple still stood. And they saw that. They left the land for 70 years, which means they're pretty old by the time they come back. When they see the Second Temple when it's finished, the scriptural record says, while all the other people are just excited to have a temple and they're rejoicing, there's a whole group of people, probably a small group, but a whole group of people who are mourning. Their mourning is mixed with the joy of this other crowd because they know how far they've fallen. Like, oh, we know what the first one was like. This second one, thank God we have it, but oh, man, what a weak thing compared to what we had. Now, this second one stood all the way through the, what we call intertestamental period between the Old and New Testaments. It's about 400 years. It stands. It's there. By the time the New Testament comes, Herod is king, right? He's the crazy guy that tried to kill Jesus and killed a bunch of babies in the process. He doesn't build a new temple, but he beefs it up. He really spent a lot of money and manpower to make this thing fantastic, glorious. And it was. So we're going to call this Herod's temple. It's the same temple, but it's, I don't know, what's a good comparison? If we were to take that shed out there by the playground, where is it, down there? And then we kept it, but we added on to it and made it beautiful and elaborate as like a play and meeting area for youth. That's kind of this, okay? He started off with this little thing, and he just made it big and beautiful. So that's what's destroyed in 70 AD. This is the last temple that has stood for the Jews to use in worship. They haven't had it for 1900 plus years. So, all that to say, a very common, maybe the most popular view in America about end times is that we must have a third temple. Now, if you know about the situation geopolitically, religiously that's going on over in Jerusalem, what's one of the major hurdles to building a third temple right now? What's there right now? The Dome of the Rock, which is one of the holiest sites for Muslims, is there where the temple is thought to have been. There's some question there. But it's on the holy mount anyway. It's on the place, around the place where the temple is built. So a lot of people who expect this to happen are theorizing, speculating, how would that go down? How could it be possible that we would find some peaceable way, hopefully, that the Muslims would be okay with the Jews building their temple right next to it, where the mosque is? Like, how could this all work out? Just wanted to warn you at this point. You're going to read, if you get into this at all, you're going to read a lot of people's timeline of the end, and I was doing this myself, that's why I can say this. They will tell the story. Bye, Denise. They will tell the story of the last days in intricate detail about how all this will go, including how the negotiations will take place with Antichrist at the helm between the Jews and the Palestinians and the Muslims of the world to make sure all of this works. They'll be built side by... Like, they'll tell you this whole intricate narrative of how it's all going to go down, just so you know. Speculation. Like, we have very little information to go on. People are going to piece together the many pieces, and they could be right. What's the problem? You can't really know. It might sound right to you, and you're like, okay, I can go with that. But just, at least in the back of your mind, just keep in mind, that's not necessarily what the Bible says. That's somebody putting all the pieces together the best they can, which God bless you, go for it. But just be careful when people say with certainty, so here's how it's going to happen. I'm like, maybe, maybe not. There's a lot you can misrepresent when you try to tell people with super clarity what the last days are going to look like. Anyway, why am I bringing this up? Because a lot of people see here, when John is told to measure the temple of God, they think John, in the prophetic spirit, is seeing a future thing. That it doesn't exist yet, especially not at his time. But God already has in mind what the temple will be, and he's saying, go measure it. Possible, because I don't know for sure. There will be an altar, of course, and then worshipers there. Now, what's interesting is he says, don't measure the outer court, and this assumes that if there's a future temple, it will have an outer court of the Gentiles. I did a little research, found out this is the only temple that we know of that had an outer court for the Gentiles, for sure. The tabernacle just had one big open courtyard with a sanctuary in the middle. When the people just went in there and did their sacrifices, there's no outer courtyard. This is a simple little thing. We actually don't know that much about Solomon's temple to be able to say there was an outer court for Gentiles and stuff. It's because of other historical documents that we know the temple built by Herod had this big outer courtyard, which is, guess where they was doing the selling of the things on the day Jesus went in there with whips. It was in the outer courtyard. And I think that's one reason why Jesus got so upset. Look, selling things to help pilgrims is not bad. That's not a bad thing. I think a lot of pilgrims are grateful they could buy things once they got to Jerusalem rather than hauling all that stuff all that way. There's nothing wrong with that. I think the main problem was, number one, they may have been overcharging, but number two, guess where they set up shop? Right where they were supposed to be welcoming Gentiles to worship the one true God. You're taking a worship space to sell stuff? Whoa. Anyway, so...
I never knew that. I never knew Gentiles were welcome to do that.
Yeah, now, this, again, just this temple, as far as we know, was for anybody. And they actually had a sign up before you went into the next level of the temple, which was the holier part. Before you went in there was a sign warning you in Latin and Greek. Why? Because that's what the nations would speak, generally, because of the Greek influence, and then the Romans spoke Latin. So they had it in the two Gentile languages, Latin and Greek, a warning that if you go into the next part of the temple, you'll die. We'll see to it. And the Romans gave them permission to do that. Because this is a sacred area. You don't defile our holy place with your Gentile presence. Ew, right? So anyway, A lot of people see that to be the point of this. Don't measure that outer part because that belongs to those Gentiles. So, with the time we have left, I want to present to you one more option, which I must say, without any certainty, this is where I lean. I'll show you why as quickly as I can. In the New Testament scriptures, what is this phrase used to describe that is not a physical building? What is it? Okay. So there's two things, actually. One is the church, and one is our human body. This is the one that's described most often. There is one reference to this being the temple of God. And I want to show you some texts just so that we have our bearings here. Let's go to 1 Corinthians. Paul is the main person to make this connection. Now, whatever you track with tonight in Revelation, I hope that you will take this to heart very much, whether you connect it to Revelation 11 or not. 1 Corinthians 3. I hope you'll take this encouragement to heart as a disciple of Jesus, because this is tremendous. 1 Corinthians 3, we're going to start in verse 16. So Paul is writing to a church of Jesus. This is a church of a lot of Gentiles. No doubt there are Jews here as well. There were Jews in every major city, and they made disciples of Jews and Gentiles in the churches. So 1 Corinthians 3. By the way, let's start in verse 9, actually. Because he doesn't use the word temple in verse 9, but he does speak of a similar idea. And Paul says, we are God's co-workers in God's service. You, the church in Corinth, you, the church collectively, are God's field, God's building. You're God's building. So then you go over to verse 16. Don't you know that you yourselves are God's temple, and that God's Spirit dwells in your midst? Now, I think this is important to point out, because I don't know all the translations of the Bible we have in here. One of the tricky things about translating from Greek to English is that in the Greek language you have very specific you. You singular, you plural. The words tell you if it's single or plural or all of the things, just like Spanish and a lot of languages are like that. English, I love English. It's the language I speak every day, but there's a lot of disadvantages to English when you're trying to bring thought over into it. One of which is when I say you got to have to figure out from context or if I'm pointing or something, if it's just one of you or all of you together. Which is why we do y'all or yuns, right? Yuns. We compensate, use guys. We compensate in English because we know this is not helpful. The you, which you, we come up with ways to make that. So anyways, what I found, I think, helpful, and I'm glad they did this, in the NIV, they added some things in there to give us English readers a clue. You yourselves, not just you. And thank God, because listen, as Americans, we are very individualistic prone anyway. We would be very happy to read the Bible as just about me, if given the chance. We need our translators to help us along and be like, no. Not you. You are God's temple. Singular. Did you catch that? The entire church community is the temple of God, not a bunch of temples. You collectively make up the temple of God. If anyone destroys, this is verse 17, if anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy that person. Whoa, that's a huge warning to someone who wants to mess with God's church. You want to introduce false teaching? You want to cause divisions so that the church goes under? You want to sue the church, which you can't destroy a church by suing it. But, definitely make a lot of problems for a church if they have to close their doors. And, a church should never stop being a church because they lose a building. Amen? Like lawsuits can't stop the church, but it definitely makes things harder. But anyways, if you go after God's church to try to bring it down, that warning is scary. Especially if you're reading Revelation. Whoa! Oh, if God wants to destroy, he can destroy. Anyway, for God's temple is sacred, And again, notice how the NIV does this. You together are that temple. Not you individually, but all of you as a church body. That's why when people talk about, I don't need to be a part of a church body to worship God, I'm like, uh-huh. But is that the whole point? Is that everything? Having the ability to worship God is not everything. You read the whole counsel of what God says about his purposes, you can't be without a church community, because without that, you're disconnected from his true temple. His overall purpose involves his whole church, not just me. Loving on him and him loving on me. Where else is this? In 1 Corinthians 6, this is where we see the one place where the individual is referred to as a temple. Their body is referred to as a temple. 1 Corinthians 6:19. And notice he brings this up to warn us against sinning with our bodies. That's why he brings up the whole notion anyway. So, 1 Corinthians 6, let's start in verse 18. Flee from sexual immorality. Man, that's not subtle. He's not like, avoid it if possible. Flee! Run! Ah! All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. And so you might be like, so what? Why does the body matter? It's the spirit that matters. That's the only thing that's going to last forever. And Paul hears this argument in the early church. It's a teaching that people are trying to bring into the church. The body doesn't matter. It's all about the spirit. So who cares what you do with your body? Paul's like, watch it. Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price, including your bodies. Amen? Amen? If God does not save your body, he does not completely save you. That's why in the resurrection of the body, God's keeping a promise to save your whole person, not just the inner part of you. The body is not meaningless. Or why would he bother saving it? The body matters greatly. We're bodily people. There's no getting around it. So anyways, therefore honor God with your bodies. Your body matters, Paul says. So that's the only place that we have in the scriptures where our actual physical body individually is referred to as a temple. And it makes sense to us because God resides there. And that's what a temple is, where God resides. Ephesians 2:21. We're just about out of time. I just want to look at a few more with you. Like I say, if anything encourages tonight, may it be these truths.
You're talking about your body being so important, and I agree with you on that, but it's the time that we're spending on earth because the Holy Spirit resides in our body.
Yes.
Right? But once we've died, our body becomes, we receive new bodies, but then we'll be with God.
Yes. And he with us. That's right. Yes.
And we won't need the Holy Spirit living in us because we will be living with God.
Yeah. His presence will simply fill the world. Yeah. So in Ephesians 2:21. Oh man, I just want to talk about these so much more than we can. So here, Paul's talking about why the Jews and Gentiles in the churches need to love each other. You need to get over your differences. You need to get over all of the walls that you've seen to be between you before, because Jesus has knocked those walls down through the cross. And so, let me start at verse 19. Because of what Jesus did, consequently, you are no longer foreigners and strangers, you Gentiles, but fellow citizens with God's people and also members of his household, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, with Christ Jesus himself as the chief cornerstone. Oh, I love it. In him, Jesus, the whole building is joined together and rises to become a holy temple in the Lord. What building? The building made up of Jews and Gentiles in the church. And in him, you too, you Ephesians are a part of this, you too are being built together to become a dwelling in which God lives by his Spirit. Another word for that is temple. 1 Peter 2:5. I don't think we're going to get to 2 Thessalonians, but we might pick it up from there next time. 1 Peter 2:5. Man, this is so good too. Same idea. Jews and Gentiles figuring out how to be one people together after being separated for so long. Chapter 2, verse 4. 1 Peter 2:4. 1 Peter, yeah. I confused myself and then confused you with 2 Peter. Okay, everybody there? As you come to him, you plural, the living stone, rejected by humans but chosen by God and precious to him. You, plural, all y'all also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. It may seem demeaning to you, but I hope it's not. That you are a living brick, you're a living stone being placed with so many others. You need other disciples. How are you going to be a building with one stone? Especially a building fit for the great King of all of heaven and earth. That I am one of so many, but I need to be there. There'd be a hole if my stone weren't placed there. I'm important, but I'm not the most important. I'm needed, but I'm not the only one needed. Amen? Oh, it's a beautiful picture. And God is building with all of our lives, all of our love for him and our worship and the stories that he can tell through our lives of what he's able to accomplish. All of us together, we create this gigantic. And I'm thinking of from the beginning with the righteous Abel, for instance, who died at the hands of wicked Cain, all the way forward to that multitude no one can count before the throne who came out of the tribulation. All of these are the living stones where God's glory is shown in the world. This is what I can do. In weak people, sinful people, rebellious people, I'm going to change them so that they're strong people, obedient people, righteous people. And if you try to kill them, even if you do kill them, I'll bring them back. And I'll give them a body you can't touch ever again. Like the whole story of God through his people is just, it's beautiful. That's why we're back to the two witnesses. We're talking about John being called a prophecy. The godly ones that are shown up in the Revelation are so important. Because if the whole story is God hates bad people and he's going to get them good, that's not the gospel. The gospel is look at what God can do in the midst of that wicked fallen world to build a beautiful temple out of these righteous people. So we're going to have to wrap this up next time talking about, is that the temple that John was told to measure? We'll pick it up from there.